Welcome, everyone. My name is Edward P. Joseph with the SAIS Foreign Policy Institute. I welcome everyone to this very timely and important discussion. And we welcome all those who are here in Pristina, those joining us from elsewhere in Kosovo, and also in Belgrade, in neighboring Serbia. So we welcome all of those participants. And all of those in the room here who are officials, activists, diplomats. We have a great collection of highly knowledgeable people in this room, experts, all of them here, all of us, here in Pristina, elsewhere in Kosovo, in neighboring Serbia, all of us concerned with one question, only one question: how to make the agreement between Kosovo and Serbia work. That is the agreement we're talking about, agreed in two locations at two dates, in Brussels on the 27th of February, the basic agreement, and then the annex agreed in Ohrid on the 18th of March. Pronounced an agreement that was negotiated with intensive EU and US negotiation and support, complete alignment between the US and EU, and a common position by EU and US officials that this agreement is in fact legally binding, all its provisions are legally binding, and that the effort and focus will be on implementation now. So that's formally where we stand. Informally and contextually, the reality known by everyone in this room and by our friends and colleagues elsewhere in Kosovo and in Belgrade all know that the enormous challenges. Number one, the ambiguity of the agreement itself. The fact that there are gaps, there are elements that are not specified, details not specified, ambiguities, some of them deliberate, that create questions. That's number one. Number two is, of course, the status of the agreement. The fact that it wasn't signed, the fact that there was no handshake between the parties, and contextually, the fact that we hear a stream of negativity about an agreement that was just signed, which is, of course, not encouraging and not what is standard in any successful international negotiation. And then finally, we have contextual here on the ground because life moves on. People's lives move forward. There are events and developments here in Kosovo. There are elections coming up, 23rd of April. There's the main Serb party has stated that it will not participate in those elections. We have President Vucic in Serbia who's stated the same and given absolutely no encouragement for Serbs to participate in those elections, and conditioned that, of course, on progress in the issue, the long-standing known issue, the association of Serb-majority municipalities. So with that context here, not very encouraging, but yet with so much riding on this agreement to finally propel relations between Kosovo and Serbia and forward in some fashion, with the potential for real improvement in the lives of Kosovo Serbs, Kosovo Albanians, everyone here, and of course a reduction of tensions between Kosovo and Serbia, being the goal in a wider context when, of course, Europe is at war here, and we have the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So that's the context here. We have informal investment by the United States and the European Union in this effort. US and EU credibility is on the line. It's not just Kosovo and Serbia that are being tested here. It's the US and EU, and we have formal obligations within the agreement itself accepted by the European Union. So that's the context that we face. There's no one here that is under any illusion that this agreement is going to be easy and smooth And in fact, of course, we're going to hear about some of the prospects if it doesn't move forward, and some of those are very bracing. So with that background as introduction, I want to introduce my friend and co-collaborator in this effort, Dr. Lulzim Petsi, founding director of KIPRED here. And Luli, thank you for co-organizing this event with us. And I turn the floor to you. And then what we're going to do here, just so you know, we have a range of speakers here, and we're going to proceed and have short interventions, again, aimed to obviously illustrate the context that we face, the risks and the potential benefits, and try to identify concrete ways to make this very important and challenged agreement work. So with that, Luli, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ed. Let me thank you for giving us opportunity to work in this joint venture together at this critical point of time for Kosovo, Serbia, and the region, I must say, because we do have interesting developments around us in the recent weeks and days. I think that the Brussels/Ohrid agreement is an important achievement towards building a sustainable detente between Kosovo and Serbia. As every agreement or new thing in our life, it faces us with a lot of fears and hopes at the same time. This combination of fears and hopes do depend a lot on the behavior of Kosovo and Serbia in this process, how seriously they are taking this process for advancing their bilateral relations and improving life of people on the ground. But also, what is the most important thing for me, it is opening for all of us the clear perspective for Euro-Atlantic integrations. We cannot think that the situation on the ground for people will improve if there is not a clear path towards Euro-Atlantic integrations for Kosovo and European integrations for Serbia. We are aware that so far this agreement is trying to be implemented under the huge pressure of United States and European Union. They have put at stake their credibility in this peacemaking effort, I can say. And I hope that in 100 days from now, or 120 days, I don't know how much they have remained, we will have, both countries will complete their obligations which are envisaged by this agreement. Tricky thing is that we don't know how they will look like at the end of the day. The annex is not sufficiently clear, and we don't know how the general agreement will be reflected in the implementation phase, how this will be translated into concrete steps for both sides. What makes me worried, it is that there is an agreement, but the political discourse, hostile political discourse, has not changed. And without changing this political discourse, I'm afraid that even if agreement will be implemented, it will result in a bitter atmosphere, and it may increase mistrust between all stakeholders. Without further ado, I think that this is a good momentum from this panel discussion to propose some steps which can strengthen the prospects for successful completion of the agreement. You, Ed, have mentioned in your recent article in Foreign Affairs, in Foreign Policy, I guess, yeah, that this agreement should be registered within the Secretariat of United Nations. This might strengthen its credibility, and it may bind two parts, and even EU and US in working harder in achieving success by the end of this process. I think that at the same time here in Kosovo, our government and we civil society stakeholders, we can work together with the Serbian community to strengthen or to build confidence building measures which are more necessary than ever. We have a huge distrust in the north. We don't see any prospect of participation of Serbian community in the upcoming local elections. And without having in place democratic institutions, and rule of law institutions, it is very difficult to imagine that this process can succeed. I hope that in the coming days, negotiation parties in Brussels will find a solution for this, that they will find a solution for this huge problem. I think it is the major problem that doesn't let us to move forward. And without further ado, I would like to pass right now the floor to our next speaker. I would like to ask Ed, as a moderator of this session, to give the floor to our speakers.
Thank you. Luli, just to check while we're hoping to have a real substantive conversation, just to precise, and you said, well, I think what everyone probably here would agree is that the hostile political discourse is very negative for the potential here to move forward. But you mentioned that you hope the negotiators in Brussels can make progress on the biggest challenge, which is, I just wanted you to say.
Oh, yes. Elections in the north and consolidation of rule of law institutions.
I understand. Okay. And obviously they're also discussing the, apparently at the last meeting, Mr. Bislimi and Mr. Petkovic discussed missing persons, and of course, the preliminaries, at least, for discussion about the association of certain majority municipalities. What I would like to do now, if I could, I would like to pass the floor. We have, as I mentioned, we have some of our participants who are joining us remotely, and I welcome them all. I'm going to introduce them as they appear when they get the floor. And Tatiana, if I could come to you first, please. Tatiana Lazarevic from Kosev, editor at Kosev. If you're hearing me okay, Tatiana, we welcome you to this event, and please take the floor.
Thank you, Edward. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me, right?
Yes,
Okay.
we hear you, Tatiana. Please.
So thank you for your introductory words. I'll just mention the angle of position of Kosovo Serbs, because I am not sure if you would have today many voices from our part. For me, dialogue is not a quick fix, because if it is, then it is an industry of peace, as I call, not a reconciliation. So what disappoints me is not the impatience of ordinary people, in this case, primarily majority community Albanian, because this is what we encounter for decades with their impatience of, that long discussions, but actually the lack of sincerity of international and domestic fighters for peace. Because I really refuse to believe that experts in peace, security, transnational justice do not know how painful it is to build peace after war, how painful it is to reconcile peoples who for decades, if not centuries, I'm talking here about Serbian and Albanian nations, looked at each other as their arch enemies. How often in history they were able to coexist, but also many often there were times in history when actually majority rules of a minority in its worst form. We've seen that in 90s. Something quite difficult Kosovo Serbs are also witnessing after the war, of course, without any intention to compare the two parts of history. So I personally don't really have much understanding with some of the new voices here. I'm starting hearing more and more after this European plan, as the latest agreement has not been signed, for instance, as an argument, or that it leaves room for ambiguity. I believe that there were a lot of expert voices, not only the political ones, who actually quite concretely answered how the latest agreement is legally binding agreement for the sides. Even opposition in Serbia, I'm sure my interlocutors from Belgrade would know that better. Even the hardliners opposition in Serbia are aware, and even say that publicly, that the Serbian government, the President Vucic himself, actually it's not only the obligation for him, but he actually undertook obligation on behalf of the country itself. So everything in the post-war history of Kosovo was something like a decade limited phase. And now this is a latest one as well. This is how I understand. The European agreement is a continuation of the Brussels agreement. Personally, I think it's culmination of the Brussels agreement and probably an interim phase to something that we call a final legal binding agreement. I personally expect another decade for this new phase to complete the process of confirming that Serbia de jure as well as de facto accepted, to put this way, accepted the separation of Kosovo as an independent state entity. That would be the selection of words I would use on behalf of the Serbian side, the points from Serbian side. So we have the substance with this latest agreement. How good the substance is, and for whom it is better, and will it bring any benefits to citizens themselves, that's a separate issue. Certainly Serbs from the north and generally Serbs in Kosovo are currently not in a group of real beneficiaries, because no agreement can work if the parties involved in it do not find their interest, and if the agreement itself does not find at least the lowest common denominator. The Serbs from Kosovo didn't find anything in the Brussels agreement that would be of interest to them. So here I'm specifically talking about the Serbs from the north, that is almost the other half of the remaining Serbs in Kosovo. Why? Because it was simply imposed on them. It was imposed on them by Belgrade, and moreover, it was the essential implementer of integration. But on the other hand, Belgrade was the chief guarantor of the implementation of integration towards the international parties. However, at the same time, the current Serbian government has never publicly admitted that it is working on integration. On the contrary, the public discourse in Serbia and amongst the Kosovo Serbian community rests on a rather opposite narrative, thus false narrative, if you ask me. So no Serbian government and no Serbian leader have ever defended, I'm paraphrasing what is the credo of these narratives, that no Serbian government or no Serbian leader but Aleksandar Vucic have ever defended Kosovo as part of Serbia and the Serbian people in Kosovo were in ever more difficult circumstances. That is actually the Serbian government and Aleksandar Vucic himself. That's the guideline of this false narrative. So Serbia is implementing the Brussels Agreement, and it is doing so behind the media spin, propaganda, fake news, disinformation, via a huge number of media that they control, among which the tabloids are certainly the striking fist. And as such, the most exposed to public, but no less important, are something that I call hybridly objective media. So by very low quality, incompetent, often with criminalized background staff in Serbian institutions, but also with the support of the criminal scene itself in Serbian public opinion, and among the Serbs in Kosovo, a narrative was created and very successfully maintained about pro-patriotic government and leader, those who defend a national interest, whose center is the defense of Kosovo and economic development. On one of the instruments for such a thing is to say the worst about the other side, in this case, Kosovo Albanians. Now, on the other hand, the Kosovo authorities have also very successfully created an image in their public opinion of, let me put this way, unjust payment of high prices with an unreasonable continuation of what was actually already presented as a fait accompli already in 1999. Kosovo is independent, Serbia is out. A narrative was developed. Unfortunately, this is what personally comes most difficult to me. A narrative was developed about Albanians as a supernation amongst the young generation, about Kosovo as a fulfillment of Albanian dreams. Something like this I would put in this way, and maybe my collaborators at Pristina could, I don't know, challenge this view. Although small, Kosovo is one of the most successful European countries and beyond. Kosovo is a measure of success by many parameters, from respect for freedoms and human rights, including the rights of minorities, the liveliness of the youngest population in Europe, a history that is described as glorious as ever, with their arch enemy Serbs and Slavs. It nurtures real democracy after the great price it paid as a victim of genocide and apartheid. But not only that, it pays the price even now during the negotiating times, still from the Serbian aggressor, the intruder, but now also on the international stage, it pays the price from the international approach towards the Serbian government, something that I think Ms. Osmani very often outlines as unfair appeasement. So once again, Kosovo portrays itself as a victim in international arena. According to the Brussels Agreement, the Kosovo authorities initially took an approach, Serbia to recognize Kosovo, and for that recognition, we already made an unfair and painful compromise. We allowed Ahtisaari's package to be incorporated into our constitution completely unfairly and passed the supervised years, independence years. We have given even greater rights to a minority in such a minor number. I'm talking about Serbs, something that has not, very often I hear that sentence, something that has not been recorded anywhere in Europe. We have gave excessive municipal rights to the small number of rural background. We are tolerating a criminal group in the north to endanger our state. And in general, we tolerate too much to the people who stole our churches by forging their own identity and whose compatriots committed genocide. So while the Kosovo authorities emphasize that they have ensured the rights of minorities, in practice, the trend is opposite. Serbs and other minority communities cannot really enjoy their rights. They are discriminated against on a daily basis. They have no full access to institutions. So I will not take further time to specify concrete example that something has been actually pointed for years. I personally think that it is only part of the we can't even talk of that systematic discrimination, as many cases remain voiceless due to severe and systematic discrimination over the years. So therefore, to conclude, if Belgrade guaranteed integration for the international community by abolishing Serbian institutions and pushing Serbs from the north into the Kosovo system, Pristina was expected to welcome Serbs, to guarantee them integration by ensuring their rights that are implemented, that they to have full and fair access to the institution. So neither of this expectation on the international stage has really been taking place. I don't know if I have more time or just I'll stop here to continue.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you so much for that. And just please note, Tatiana, while we got most of it, your internet connection is not 100%. So there was, just please know that there were, you're coming in a little bit broken at times with an interval. So if there's any, if you have any technical help there. And again, I'm going to try to help us all along here, extract, just a couple of key points from what each speaker, as I did for Luli and as just Tatiana, what I thought it was quite significant that you said that this is a significant agreement, that it has the potential. We have, this is, I think, how you put it. We have the substance in this latest agreement, so you're not writing it off as nothing. You said we have the substance in this agreement, but we have to see that it will work in the interests. And I understand that you see that it was written in a form, as you put it, of lowest common denominator. But I took that point, and I also take your point there at the end that, in your view, Serbs cannot enjoy their rights, that they're discriminated against. And the way you, as I get it, you see that if Belgrade guaranteed the integration of Kosovo Serbs, then it's by abolishing Serbian institutions, then Pristina should be expected to welcome that step and step up the effort of protecting Kosovo Serb rights. And what I would ask you, Tatiana, I'm going to leave you with a question but we'll come back to you to get the answer. But maybe Dusan Janic and Sonja Biserka may have a point as others, is with this question of Serb rights, would you, we'll take your views on what that means in terms of the association of Serb municipalities, what that concretely means in your view, for Kosovo Serbs, what that has to mean so that Kosovo Serbs can participate fully as citizens of this country. And I would just ask you then again later to think about, would Council of Europe membership for Kosovo be a plus for Kosovo Serbs in protecting their rights, in that Kosovo Serbs would have access to the European Court of Human Rights, and then in that sense, perhaps might support that. And then also, of course, Tatiana, we'll have to come back to you on this upcoming election and whether it's possible for Serbs to participate despite the negative signals that we have. So we'll come back to you, Tatiana. And again, if you have any support there who can help with the internet connection, it would be great. We still did, as you heard, I hope, we still heard most of what you had. And then, Luli, I'm going to, Albin?
Yes.
Yes. And then it's my pleasure now, Tatiana, we'll be coming back to you. It's my pleasure now to give the floor back here in Pristina to Dr. Albin Hajrullahu of the University of Pristina. Albin, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Edward Joseph, and dear guest, distinguished guest. It is an honor, and I hope with my short introduction, I will contribute to make a clearer picture and not to complicate it more than it is. the 2023 holistic agreement between Serbia and Kosovo should be understood and treated as it is, as a set menu and not a la carte menu. I would say that it would be naive to assume that the contracting parties will naturally behave in good faith as stated in the implementation annex. Serbia is demonstrating the absence of good faith almost every single day. Thus, the lack of clear implementing mechanisms within a given time frame is a serious challenge and risk. However, all parties are expected to fulfill their respective part of the contractual duties and responsibilities. By saying all parties are meant not only Serbia and Kosovo, but the EU and the US as well. In this sense, the EU and the US have a key, if not the most important role to play in the whole process forward. In fact, not only Serbia and Kosovo, but the EU as well is in a big need of an energetic and proactive US engagement and support. The EU needs ultimately to speak with one voice and finally to overcome the internal division regarding Kosovo's statehood. The litmus test, in my opinion, of the 2023 holistic agreement between Kosovo and Serbia will be confirmed by two key elements. The first element of this litmus test is if Kosovo's road for a swift membership in international organizations and settings will be enabled, such as NATO's PFP, NATO's Membership Action Plan, UNESCO, Interpol, Council of Europe, and even OSCE and United Nations. The second element of the litmus test is if we will see a united position on Kosovo's statehood within the European Union. In order to enable peace and stability in the Western Balkans, the 5 EU non-recognizers should join the 22 other EU members and ultimately recognize Kosovo's statehood. As a matter of fact, on the way to a future mutual recognition as the ultima ratio for the lasting peace and stability in the Western Balkans, even Serbia, at least for now, accepts that the Republic of Kosovo exists. Thus, a positive litmus test regarding the 2023 holistic agreement between Serbia and Kosovo is not only in the hands of Serbia and Kosovo. Indeed, the EU is the master key to help Serbia to solve its own never-ending geopolitical dilemma, wandering between the East and West, and to be liberated from the discourse about Kosovo. At the same time, a positive litmus test would help Kosovo as well to be liberated from the discourse about Serbia and to focus further in the rule of law and economic development. Again, in order to make this positive scenario, all 27 EU member states needs to give peace and stability in the Western Balkans a real chance by recognizing Kosovo's statehood right now. Moreover, if you wish, Kosovo's recognition by all EU member states would not only be a recognition of Kosovo's lawful right to exist, but also the best policy to ensure the immense Western investment in the Western Balkans. And to come back to your very single question, how to make it work, the master key to urgently make the 2023 holistic agreement between Serbia and Kosovo work is not in Belgrade and it is not in Pristina, but it is in the 5 capital cities of the 5 EU non-recognizers. I would stop for now here and I would be open for any further comment and question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Albin, and I think that was very clear, and we have folks in the room who can process and understand that message, as well as online, the folks watching online, and the challenges, of course, to that are known, and we should, as you mentioned, the 5 non-recognizers, just to note that not all of them have the exact same posture towards Kosovo, and to note that while recognition is the critical, as you put it, and I would say correctly, the litmus test, and so essential for Serbia as well, there could be steps, Albin, would you agree, that the non-recognizers could do? Spain could open a liaison office, for example, here. Spain and Slovakia could both return troops to KFOR, and think there could be at least some initial steps to, as gestures of support, additional, like in addition to registering the agreement at the UN, to show seriousness and commitment, and that there's momentum on this. With that, let me turn now back to where we'll go actually to Belgrade now, and welcome Dusan Janic to our program. Dusan, it's a wonderful privilege to have you with us from the Forum for Ethnic Relations. Dusan, you have the floor.
Okay, it's better now. Yes, finally it's better. So first of all, I will make just a few points. The first is about our today's topic. Basically about what we are talking. We have to talk about the agreement, which was built March, April. Now we are also in April, beginning of April. It is in the substance, it is agreement for comeback on the track for negotiation, no dialogue, negotiation about normalization process. That's about that. If we are talking about that basic, the text of the basic agreement, I could say welcome. It's really welcome, and finally. For example, for ethnic relations, we issued the same text, 2018, as our participation for Vucic internal dialogue, proposing that I could not basically
Dusan,
criticize the project.
Dusan, sorry to interrupt. Hey, can you hear me? Sorry, I beg your pardon to interrupt. So we just got the sign came on that your internet connection is unstable. One solution potentially is maybe if you can just turn the video, sometimes that's recommended so we can hear you, but it's coming in broken. It's even more broken than when Tatiana was speaking. So if you want, if you want to just try to close the video, the camera, but stay with the audio and then rejoin.
Okay, have 5 minutes.
Yeah, yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, that's everything what I said about this nice paper. We could call him Karl Marx manifest, this communist manifest, which will come maybe in reality in the next 2-3 years. In this very moment,
Dusan,
I like to make. Sorry.
Yeah, čujete me? Teško vas čujem. Prekidaj stalno. Možda lakše ako možete ugasiti fotoaparat. Samo fotoaparat. Ako možete to ugasiti, onda lakše vas čujemo. Jer želimo vas slušati. Does it work, Dusan? Dusan, it seems it's frozen. Can you hear me?
Could you hear me? Could you hear me? Hello? Okay, something is wrong.
No, it's okay. Dusan, you're back. I think we're all back, and I think we can hear you better now. You have the floor.
Okay. My first point was about the text of agreement or come back to the track of negotiation about the normalization of the relations. We are really at the beginning of the story. and that will be really hard, complicated process. Hoping that, because I really agree with this solution proposed in this text, I am just hoping that that will be really respecting through the dialogue, and that the final results will be close to that paper. Just to say, in this very moment, I could not say, I am not trying to be Vanga, I could not say what will be association of Serbian community, because that has to be discussed. It's clearly said that that has to be discussed, and that in the mind must to be take also the chapter 7 and 6 of the agreement, basic agreement. Basically, that is Ahtisaari plan, that is Kosovo institution. Stop with the manipulation. So much manipulation about that. That's first. The second, what I really like to point out, if I am correctly informed, the government of Kosovo decided not to postpone elections. The local elections will be organized. Having in mind that, and having in mind what was said yesterday in Raška by Vucic, I could say that the one point, hoping and believing that the Serbian list will organize the peaceful boycott, that they will allow it to people who want to go to vote. I'm believing. From the other side, I don't know who will give the guarantee for security. That is not now in the hand of Vucic, is not in the hand of Srpska lista, because Srpska lista and Vucic motivated Serbs to leave institutions, security. What my point is, unfortunately, we are closer to the new phase of the crisis, security crisis on the north, than the beginning of dialogue. That's first point. The second, I could fully understand and accept what Kurti and Bislimi is talking. They are promoting the policy of reciprocity, of course. It's really so close to the heart of Vucic. And he announced yesterday that will be reciprocity. But the reciprocity is not the political atmosphere, is not the way to come to the dialogue. Anyway, both sides, as I could understand, now are trying to buy the time to postpone the beginning of the serious negotiation, hoping that something will be changed in the future. And the last point is, what is the problem now arised? Is the problem with the credibility of the Queen Group, especially American administration. Because American administration was so strongly forced, also Belgrade, to accept the agreements, to accept to come on the dialogue, but they failed into one point. They promised that I could quote it, Ambassador Hill, Escobar, Scholle, so many people, they are promised that before starting the dialogue, they will establish the security on the north. Unfortunately, now we are faced with something what is not implemented. Instead of that, the bureaucracy and diplomacy of Brussels promoted a really great progress and so on and so on. Just to finish, I completely agree what Betsy said at the beginning, the context, the political context, unfortunately telling us that we could promote something, we could support something, but nobody could say this very moment if that agreement will be the paper, the basis for the one successful story, or maybe the last phase and the collapse of the idea of normalization. That the second solution will be a really disaster for all people living on the Kosovo, not only for the Serbs, for Serbia and for the region. That's my point.
Dusan, thank you very much. And we did hear you much better now, and it was clear. And again, as with the others, I think you also gave some very clear and important points that I just repeat, for those watching who didn't maybe quite capture it. But that I thought this was quite significant. And I think your point, as we talked here previously, is I think shared here, Dusan, here in Pristina, that we are closer to a conflict in the north now, over a security confrontation, than before the dialogue began. So this is the great irony that in the wake of the agreement, your perception, and I believe there are those in the room here who would share that completely, that we're actually closer to. Let me quickly ask you, Dusan, when we have a clear internet connection with you, do you see any immediate steps that US-EU could do with Belgrade and Pristina to avert that? So, because the things in this agreement will take some time, but to avert that, and plus, there's an immediate test that cannot be avoided one way or the other, which is these elections. Today's the 14th. That's 9 days from now, this the 23rd of April. But there'll be, even if they go without any incidents, which we certainly hope, there can be negative political consequences developing how that. So do you have any thoughts? And I know definitely we'll come back to Tatiana on that later. Please, Dusan, any thoughts how we avoid the conflict?
Trying to say in 1 minute, only what I could see in this very moment, because time is running, is that states, America, has to initiate a roundtable or open meeting, it doesn't matter, close meeting with the Queen group, with the partners, which are not partners in reality, talking about the German and French governments and their policy in reality in the Kosovo. And they have, first of all, to agree how they want to help Kosovo government and Serbia to overcome the issue of leaving Serbs from institutions, Srpska lista Serbs, especially the one security issue. How, basically, what is the minus in all process? No any talks about the security package. No any bloody words in that agreement, because EU is against, of course, but American, they have the power, they have the credibility, they have to start that dialogue by side of the Brussels dialogue of normalization. But the dialogue about the security package, meaning the communication between Serbia, Kosovo, about the paramilitaries and others, must to start immediately. Immediately means 1-2 months, because time is not working for the peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dusan. Very clear, very, very clear. To start that urgent dialogue on security matters, with U.S. playing a central role there. Very clear about that. And now, my pleasure here to turn to my left and welcome, give the floor here to our co-collaborator on this event, Cendrim Gashi of the Council of Kosovo Ambassadors, formerly, you mentioned France, Dusan. Well, Ambassador Gashi was the Kosovo ambassador in France, in addition to being a University of Chicago trained mathematician. So we turn to Cendrim to tabulate where we stand.
Thank you, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here with you, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I will risk to say some platitudes, but I guess it's worth repeating some things. I believe that this historic moment should be utilized by all parties, not just Kosovo and Serbia, but the EU and the United States, especially the EU, which should see moving to converge towards a united position vis-a-vis Kosovo, the Balkans, and indeed Russia. I mention Russia because the aggression against Ukraine has had an impact in every corner of Europe, and it has had an impact in this agreement. The main problem in our region are the nationalist forces in Belgrade. However, this should not absolve of its responsibility the populist forces that govern Kosovo. The proposed agreement is a reflection of the negotiations that have taken place between the government of Kosovo and its representatives. So there should be now a reflection of the forces in Kosovo, both in the government and the opposition, that have held the country back for 10 years and which have been utilized by Belgrade to delay a solution. There should be questions for the EU. Why this agreement is only now possible, and why did we waste 10 years? The opposition should be behaving in a state-responsible manner. The relations with the United States have been hurt, and they should not be dependent on individuals. The future of Kosovo and Serbia is European, so it is right that the compromise be chosen and found in the triangle of Brussels, Pristina, and Belgrade, with the support of the United States. The alternative for Kosovo was indeed an isolation and a damaging one. Now, some believe that Serbia moving to the Western column is possible. Many, including myself, believe it's not an easy step, and actually, I have serious doubts, because look at some countries within the EU and NATO and how much regress in many fields, including human rights and flirting openly with Kremlin, have taken place. So I do remain very skeptical regarding the strategic culture of the government and the elite in Belgrade. So further questions for the EU is why Serbia is being allowed to sell the same thing over and over. Or alternatively, you could say they're being allowed to use the salami tactic. We are gathered here to speak about the implementation, and that's actually going to be a very difficult one, not least because of the history of the implementations of the past agreements. From our side, I believe we should have three principles. One, the interest of Kosovo's citizens, regardless of their ethnicity. This includes the Serbs of Kosovo. Two, the European future of the entire region. That means of Kosovo and Serbia in particular. And three, a close partnership with the United States. I believe that in all these three, we have seen setbacks. We have seen setbacks regarding the relations with the Serb community, regarding the partnership with the United States, and actually not realizing that a solution should be a European one. Some believe that this agreement was a de facto agreement, a de facto acceptance of Kosovo's independence by Serbia. It was quite alarming to see EU officials or spokespeople who claim that this is not a de facto agreement. Some believe that this is a decisive step toward normalization. The truth is, it's not the final step, and that's what's disappointing. So the recognition by the EU5 remains unrealized, and membership in international organizations remains still a hope, but not a certainty. Now, I hope that we are witnessing the beginning of the weakening of nationalist forces in Belgrade, and as I mentioned earlier, of populist forces in Pristina, so that there can be a more favorable terrain to have a European spirit and solution. That is not agreed, that is not guaranteed, however. And adding to the political and security questions and challenges that have been mentioned by the previous guests here, there are the economic and demographic challenges, which are colossal for Kosovo and the entire region. So this agreement is not a full normalization. That's why there are many people who doubt that this agreement will be fully implemented. However, I think that it is worth supporting it. And one clear way of making sure that the EU's work on this, together with the United States, and the political support for the agreement grows, is by having a UN General Assembly resolution that salutes this agreement. Because let us not forget that the dialogue, famous dialogue between Pristina and Belgrade, Kosovo and Serbia, started with the UN General Assembly resolution. And maybe we've seen moving away from creative ambiguity to some creative ink, which does not exist according to the EU. I'm not going to dwell too much on the signing of the agreement, because that is not essential. Implementing it is essential. Who will implement it? There we need real leadership. I do not see it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chandran. Again, I want to just quickly take two key points that you said. So a theme that I think we've heard here, that this agreement is not something just to be dismissed, despite all the challenges. That the agreement itself has content, it has value and has some potential. Although Chandran, you and everyone here, of course, acknowledges the enormous challenges, and that means the enormous obligations on the part of the EU and US to make this thing work. But no one is just writing it off and being dismissive. That's number one. And then this other point here, you gave us a concrete suggestion here, quite interesting one, of and also you put it in the context of the region, economic and demographic. Come on, all these countries are losing population, and so you remind us of that, that this is enough already, of all of these issues and debates, and the stagnation is just killing this region, and it cannot be tolerated. So even as difficult as it is, and as ambiguous as this agreement is, that we need to find focus on ways of advancing it. And I've noted your very interesting recommendation that this should be the subject of a UN General Assembly resolution. And Luli was good enough to mention my suggestion at there in foreign policy, that register this with the UN, and I think your suggestion as well. These are so important. We cannot let this agreement die because of cynicism and skepticism. And these gestures, these are so important. They signal seriousness, and they go a long way. So that's, I think, a very interesting suggestion. Now, with that, Sonia, I hope you are with us. And Sonia, my apologies. Great. Sonia, my apologies for not coming to you earlier. I didn't see you on our Zoom screen here, so I didn't think you were.
Yeah, I turned off the audio in order to hear better.
That's fine. But that's why I skipped you earlier. But Sonia, please, from Helsinki Committee for Human Rights in Serbia, please, you have the floor. Welcome.
Yeah, first, I would like to make few comments on the US engagement in the Balkans nowadays. First of all, they are concerned mainly with security and closing down Kosovo issue and suppression of Russians. And so these are the two directions they act at the moment. And this is probably makes limitation for their bigger contribution to direct implementation of this agreement, Ohrid and Brussels. But regarding Serbia, I would say that we have some kind, because Tamara has mentioned this reconciliation. The problem is that I would say not only Serbia, but Serbia the most, we have this kind of victimhood nationalism and the culture memory, culture memory, which is totally denying any kind of responsibility. So we are victims in Bosnia, Croatia, Kosovo, and so on. So this is the major obstruction for our society to cross this line, even though we have civic society in Serbia, journalists, individuals, and so on, who have really done a lot on this issue. But of course, it's marginalized at this moment. So the mainstream is the memory culture, which is creating this, how picture of Serbs always being victims, always being perceived as small Russians, therefore West is always against them, and so on. And it also is covered by the official culture, by the media, by the narratives which are in the public and the media sphere. We have war criminals who are indicted for crimes in Kosovo, who are the main interpreters of what has happened all over the former Yugoslavia and so on. So this is very difficult this moment to penetrate into this narrative and offer something else. In this sense, Kosovo Serbs are the hostages of Belgrade policies, because they are not. Belgrade is unfortunately not interested in Kosovo Serbs, as it was not interested in Croatian Serbs. And I would say also Republika, they are only focused on the territory, whether they can get it or not. They're always in waiting. So there's also now. So Vucic is a big manipulator. His manipulative space is smaller. It's shrinking, but it is still there. So he's at this moment, balancing between Russia presence. We have about 300,000 Russians in this country. They're not necessarily all against Putin. They have all kind of business here. And of course, we have Serbian Orthodox Church, which is also pro-Russian, deeply so. At this moment, it's not voicing anything about Kosovo. So we can expect that at one moment they will probably jump in relating to the status of the Serbian Orthodox Church. And this is, what is at stake. And I would say Serbia is more interested in Montenegro now. So Kosovo keeps, the critical situation as if it is going to be a conflict. I don't think there will be a conflict, though there is a potential, but it's sort of creating these tensions. This diverts attention from Montenegro, for example, and Republika Srpska. Well, United States has issued this warning statements, but nothing has happened so far, because Dodik is the biggest or the biggest exponent of Russian interest in the region. And Vucic is playing with that. He is now trying to rebrand all Serbian leaders in the region and to offer, I would say, Western Serbian world, like Milatovic, like maybe Jelena Triba, what's her name? The lady in Republika Srpska. So this is his plan. Whether he will succeed, it depends, of course, on the engagement of the US in the first place, and then the EU. EU has different mechanisms and tools to deal with the region. It's not meant for this kind of critical situation. So it is really United States which has the muscle to interfere. So how far and how seriously they will do it, I'm not sure, because there are too many other open issues for United States, and they are in hurry to close down Balkans, even though it may not be, only on the surface of being pacified, the region, but not truly solving the problem. So, and this is how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong, but also, what is the Quad initiative? Who is behind it? And how did it come out? To me, it looks like Serbo-Albanian world. Is it true or not? I don't know. But this is something that we, from the very beginning, have this, someone has mentioned earlier, this relationship between Rama and Vucic. And of course, Vucic or Belgrade was always looking for a partnership in Tirana, not in Pristina, to solve Kosovo issue, and that was almost done a few years ago and was stopped by Angela Merkel. So this relation is not surprising. I mean, this good relation between the two countries. Serbs travel to Albania and Albanians travel to Serbia and so on. So this is something which is now becoming a constant. It's really about Kosovo, how Vucic thinks to proceed with that. He's still hoping to get some kind of territorial solution, which I hope he will not, because that would be a disaster for Kosovo Serbia. Because without their integration in Kosovo institutions, they cannot be a political actor in the Kosovo society. So this is something which has to be borne in mind in order to make them real political actors in this society. So it's something also about our society being captured. Many people in all these international reports are mentioning captured state, but we are also captured society, because there are no channels to act or to sort of voice different approach to this problem. And for example, recent poll in Serbia says that about 30% of citizens are having a liberal, are on the position of liberal values, but they are disengaged. So the problem is how to mobilize this part of the society to become more vocal and to sort of penetrate this not only nationalistic, but also populistic political arena, which is totally now unfunctionable for opposition parties, but also for the civic society. And we are now in some kind of occupation by Vucic's media, by his NGOs, civic society, and also by his parties which are voicing always the same thing. And occasionally they sort of open up for something else, but it's not constant and it doesn't affect the public opinion. For example, they invite, opposite people with opposite sort of view on Kosovo or Russia or something, but it's so sporadic, so it doesn't affect the public opinion. That's the problem. So I think the EU and America, first of all, should handle with the media in Serbia, probably in the region, but I'm talking about Serbia, because this is the most important channel to make this breakthrough. And I'm afraid that Vucic is still able to keep it under his control.
We got Sonia. Thank you for all those insights. And I just now we're going to come to the hopefully to the real essence of it. Sonia, you raised a phrase that I think gives us an opportunity to turn to part two of this event right now, which is to drill down on that main question, how to move this forward. You said, you have a phrase, Sonia, that stuck in my mind, that the U.S. is in a hurry to solve the Balkans, yes, but not really tackling it. Now, here's the thing. This is what's interesting, is this agreement between Serbia and Kosovo requires drilling down. It's not just papering over. It's not that type of an agreement. It has its many ambiguities, but we have these two tests. There are two immediate tests that are coming, and they will either succeed or they won't, or maybe in some third way. But the two tests, I'm going to, Tatiana, I'm coming back to you here. On this, we're going to restart our sequence, and also we have Ogden Gogic on the line, also there from Belgrade, and I want to bring him in and others, including in this room. But Tatiana, if you can join us, or Ogden, either one of you, what about this question of the association? And Ogden, we have the question of the elections coming up in April. So these are not to be avoided. And so how do you see those two issues? Vucic has linked them, has conditioned one on the other, has conditioned the Kosovo Serb return to institutions as dependent on the association. But is the association possible if Kosovo Serbs are still in a boycott posture? Please, Ogden, you have the floor.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address those issues. So when you mentioned those two interconnected issues, the elections and the association, there is kind of catch-22, I would say, because President Vucic yesterday reiterated his position that the establishment of the association is a precondition for the return of Serbs to the institutions. Whereas, according to the legislation, it should actually go the other way around. So the Serbs should return to the institutions, elections should be held, and then the new local assemblies should delegate local councillors, which would then adopt a statute of the association and establish it. So basically, the return of institutions should precede the establishment of the association. But what is the funny coincidence? Both issues that we dealt with in the conversation, the elections and the associations, have actually been addressed in a Brussels agreement. And it just occurred to me that in a couple of days, we will mark the 10th anniversary of reaching the Brussels agreement. So, and then my question is, why aren't we dedicating this kind of occasion to reflect on what are the achievements and milestones of the Brussels agreement? Instead, we're actually talking about some new agreement and the opportunities that it allegedly provides. My actual answer to that is that there's actually not much to say about the Brussels agreement because it's actually being undermined, not to say annulled. And 10 years after, we actually entertain ourselves with some new agreement and hope that it will actually bring some stability or normalization. I have, from the get-go, I have not been impressed with this agreement. I'm completely disillusioned because if there is one thing that we do not need in the process, it's new agreements. We have had plenty of those. There's a proliferation of agreements, and it seems like that each agreement should serve as a band-aid or carpet to sweep all the issues under it. And I think that it was just like a short-term maneuver by this current agreement by the EU to cover up for the past failures and to maybe stabilize the situation on the ground for some time. But it's actually, I do not see this as a milestone. I do not see it as something that will have some kind of lasting impact, and so that it will be that it will put relations between Serbia and Kosovo on a more sustainable basis. Instead, actually, it only served as some short-term to achieve some sort of political aims. And it reminds me of the Washington Agreement that was reached in White House in 2020, which was signed. And by the same terms that the agreement should also be binding, but we're not referring to that agreement any longer. And I'm afraid that we will not refer to this agreement. It will probably wind down as time goes by. Why I'm upset about the whole thing is because I think that US and EU have different considerations when it comes to this region. So the issue between Serbia and Kosovo is not even the paramount. I do not think that there is a sufficient leverage from the EU and US to really follow through. I'm primarily referring to Serbia because I do not think that, for instance, EU and US would exert too high pressure on Serbia and risking completely alienating Serbia from them. So this is more like a compromise, and I think that EU and US have already downplayed the significance of this agreement themselves. I think it was just too early and premature and far-fetched to pursue some long-term normalization at this point. What should have been the focus and emphasis should be placed on the more like a stability on the ground. I'm just stunned by how the mediators from the EU and US, but primarily from the EU, casually ignored the situation on the ground and behaved as there's nothing wrong, nothing going on in the north of Kosovo. I'm primarily referring to that. So what the issue is the situation in the north is still quite volatile. There is obviously a gap or the vacuum that was created by the withdrawal of Serbs from the institutions, and that issues have never been addressed properly. And they actually are moving forward with those other commitments and ignoring conveniently that there is a powder keg on the north. So I think it's inexcusable for me that issue has not been brought up in the last meeting held by between Petković and Bislimi. I think we should also call to account the EU mediators, instead of actually focusing on those large, far-fetched long-term goals and praising a new agreement, like we have not had enough of those. I think that focus should be placed more on the immediate and imminent crisis on the ground, because we have those elections coming now. Firstly, that might be a trigger in itself. There might be some incidents occurring on the ground, like we had in December, but also even if those institutions get formed, then Serbs will not recognize their decisions. They will not actually acknowledge those institutions illegitimate. And there's another crisis emerging. So I think that focus should actually be on that. And I think that the first and logical step in implementation of this agreement should have been discussing the terms under which Serbs will take part in the elections, return institutions, return to the police, and then afterwards, to talk about how to establish association. And just one short point about the association, it's alleged by the president of Serbia, actually he's been claiming that a management team provided the draft statute of the association in 2018. I had a chance once to ask Srpska Lista to disclose it, and they refused. So my question is, if that's such an important thing for Serbian side, why has nobody disclosed that statute right away? I mean, already. I think that would be, for me, the next step should be to ask Serbian side to finally reveal that statute, so that we can all learn what are the expectations of Serbs when it comes to regarding the association. Thank you.
Thank you. Ogden, I'm going to turn here to Luli again, and just note here, Ogden, let me just point out one thing there, because it's also significant, that you said that this there's a backward sequence, that instead of conditioning the return of Kosovo Serbs to institutions on the association, the Kosovo Serbs should first return to the institutions, and it's then on that basis, through that the association would develop. So that's number one. The second was, you were then saying, this is just an agreement, it's not a milestone, and the focus should be on the actual situation and tensions in the north. I would just say this, I'm going to hand it over to Luli in a second, is that the two are connected. So the one of the drivers, maybe some people will disagree and say, that's not the only driver, but one of the drivers is the entire unresolved situation between Kosovo and Serbia. And you heard Sonia use the term that Kosovo Serbs are hostages of Belgrade. So as long, as that dynamic continues, where, we don't need to deal with wider issues, we'll just deal with, immediate, this security incident and that arrest. We forget what Sonia is telling us, which is that Belgrade is keeping Kosovo Serbs as hostage, and a hostage scenario, of course, is a high tension scenario. So with that, let me turn the floor over not just to Dr. Lulzim Petsi, but I should have mentioned Ambassador Lulzim
Too many
Petsi.
titles. Too many titles.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Ed, very much. Well, I have a question for Sonia and Dusan, and really I do appreciate your presence today in this panel discussion. And well, the question that I have for both of you is that, given the current circumstances and the agreement in Brussels and Ohrid, what could be strategies and tactics of Vucic for partition of Kosovo, if this is his long-term aim? And the second question, having in mind your perspective from diplomatic cycles in Belgrade, if I may ask you, is how much they are aware about this strategic intention of Vucic, and how they are trying to divert it in the light of Russian aggression in Ukraine. It's a bit complex question, but I think that it can give us a lot of answers given the current circumstances and the prospects for success of this agreement. Well, whoever, Sonia, ladies first, for sure.
Can I say something? I would like to add to what I already have said. There is a circulating theory in the region, especially Montenegro and Bosnia, that Americans are heading for three centers to dominate the region: Tirana, Belgrade, and Zagreb. And they see it as that Open Balkans is one tool for that. And that also the appeasement to Belgrade at this moment and possibly to Rama is in the function of this, how should I say, idea. I don't know whether it's true. Bugajski has written about it. He says he doesn't have proof for that, but describing the situation in the region, it looks like it is something creeping in. So I don't know whether any of you have thought about it, but I mean, this is something that should be discussed maybe, and in a way see whether it is really an option that Americans are pushing forward, and why in my view, it shouldn't be solved like that. The Balkans should really be on equal footing. All these new states, they call it statelets, that they are not sustainable economically, and that these three centers will dominate politically and economically. So it's something that deserves attention, I would say. So this is my proposal.
Dusan, please.
Yeah. First of all, I could not be sure, but I will take the risk to say that Vucic is not on the track of the partition. He used the internal dialogue 2016, 17, 18 to checking that possibilities. And he given up on that because it was shown so clearly also in Serbian society, international community in the region that could not solution. In this very moment, I think that he will play what he said that he will play. He will play multi-vector policies, including the famous and favorite or political favorite of Kurti, reciprocity. The measures of reciprocity, and what is the aim? The aim is basically to participate in dialogue, but buying the time for overcoming more serious problems. One of the more serious problems than Kosovo now is energy security of Serbia. And that problem could not be overcome only with the resources of Serbia. It's needed international investments, it's needed the time, and finally is needed that what mentioned in Open Balkan or the right definition of Escobar was the regional association on energy, infrastructure and trading sectors that is needed. Because you could not survive as the one isolated unit in energy sector. And going concretely, it's impossible overnight to change the policies for any politicians. And basically the normalization is something that you could not implement in the full sense with the reciprocity policy and the policy of multi-vector conflict management. Because that's for this kind of the policy, you need the really strong ethno-nationalistic support. It's true that in Serbia, the majority of people are following the ethno-nationalistic agenda, and in the last few months, majority of people were pro-Russian. Now that is slowly changing. And what I could see immediately in the next days, we will see some kind of the new version of conflict management game of Vucic, because the decision, the not postponing election, the local election give to him the nice chance to basically to have the international campaign against credibility of Kurti government, blah, 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 against the credibility of the other side. But in the meantime, they will continue to negotiate the details. In the short term, 2-3 years, surely that Serbia will finish in so-called the Western Bloc, thanks to the investments in energy sector and the other moves. But politically, that will continue to be like Montenegro today or Macedonia, deeply divided society about the values, about the main orientation. Somebody said, I think the Gashi said, that basically that, sorry, I don't know who said, that Serbia will not overcome so easy and take the time, how to say, partition of that dilemma. What is our way? It's membership in NATO or to play some cards with Russia, China, and everybody. Because the membership in NATO, it's the main issue. That's the issue on which, in this very moment, nobody, including Vucic, could say openly what they have to do. But everybody knows without the membership or cooperation, close cooperation with NATO, Serbia could not overcome or survive in the next coming conflicts in Ukraine and around the Middle East and Central Asia. That's my point. Vucic is an important player in this very moment. Somebody will say, unfortunately, I'm trying to be realistic. I'm not happy with that. But who is the guy for American point of view? And I saw also the interview statement of German special advisor Kurti, and in this very moment, Kurti and Vucic are the delivering boys. They are thinking that they are delivering boys. I'm sure that Vucic will continue to be important, including the next coming elections when he will change his position, the prime minister, and he will be at that moment more needed for the West to delivering the deals. They have a lot of deals. Now is not the time for talk about that. But unfortunately, Kosovo is not the priority. In this very moment, it's an issue for Serbia is not the priority. Nobody will tell you because of nationalism and the public opinion, but in reality, Vucic has to resolve so many other issues, and Kosovo is not so high rating in that list.
Thank you, Dusan. We're going to open the floor here to our other guests here with us in Pristina. I'm going to try to get Tatiana. She's a busy editor. She maybe has breaking news she's dealing with. Tatiana, if you are there, I'm going to try to come to you in a second. Quickly, Sonia and Dusan, I want to, as much as it's interesting for me and a fascination on geopolitics, I want to try to turn us back to the theme. We're trying to get to how to make this agreement work. Sonia, just quickly on the, there's always appetite for conspiracies, and I've been asked already in Montenegro about this theory, Tirana, Belgrade, and so forth. And I'm not going to get into all of it. Just to say one thing, I did not see a lot of visits. Maybe I missed something, but I don't recall a lot of visits to Edi Rama on Kosovo. So I didn't see a lot of that, so I'm having some trouble processing this. I think it's a very easy thing to say that because of unpopular positions and unpopular stances, and in my view, these are counterproductive and not in U.S. interest. But I wouldn't. I think it's strange to put it into this trio. Serbia is in a very particular situation. The relationship with the U.S. with Aleksandar Vucic, this is a particular one. I don't think it's reflected at all in the posture towards Tirana and Zagreb. These are different kettles of fish, in my opinion. If Rama were some kind of bulwark, then we would have seen his role in this, and I think everything has been built around Kurti here in Kosovo, and people can correct me. I don't think there's been any attempt to try to bring Albania this. And on open Balkans, yes, of course, it has that consequence, which is why I've warned against it. But let's give the Europeans some credit here and the Germans some credit. The Berlin process meeting in October was quite successful and significant. So, and my understanding is that there's more in store on the Berlin process front. So we'll see that. And Montenegro is also its own specific case. But Tatiana, if you are with us, please help us come back to the theme. How can we make this agreement work? You're an important part of the Kosovo Serb community here. What is it that you expect from this association? We've heard, we know Besnik Bislimi has 5 criteria. What are your criteria? What do you want to see for Kosovo Serb community? Please.
Get back to reality again. I'm trying to be today voice of my community, so not really speaking from a journalistic position. To conclude, there are 2 key problems as far as Serbs in Kosovo are concerned. As I spoke in the beginning, that this jointed narrative that I mentioned is coming from Belgrade, primarily from the president of Serbia, while Belgrade hands over the remaining sovereignty to Kosovo. At the same time, he keeps Kosovo Serbs as hostage. This is, I would say, one of very few parts that I agree with Ms. Biserko, particularly. I personally am not in favor of black and white narrative, especially when it comes for experts to discuss how they're unwilling for nonsense. It can be just, always like a duty, bad guy and the other is evil. So it's just not my style. But I agree with her about keeping Kosovo Serbs as hostages, but more importantly, truly voiceless. And the problem number 2, I'll repeat once again, the majority society, the majority public opinion is unfriendly, oriented towards Serbs in Kosovo, radicalized, led by populist politics, nationalistic towards everything, unfortunately, that somehow has this prefix Serb. This is the perception from the Kosovo Serbian community when it comes to majority community, the way how they perceive themselves, perceived by the majority community. Now, to make sure that there is no confusion, again, Serbs in Kosovo are under double control and under double pressure. Above all, now we are talking about Serbs in the north. The pressure comes from Belgrade. The pressure comes also from Pristina with this kind of agenda, this kind of radicalization and nationalistic society. Now, to describe, try to give a little, just one sentence diagnose of the position of Kosovo Serbs in order to answer about the association, and you asked me about Council of Europe and other things. Speaking of Kosovo Serbs, currently, they feel deeply discriminated, as I said, disenfranchised, insecure, unwanted, abandoned, humiliated. So for years, they have been already broken in their numbers, in other potentials, in political, socioeconomic, intellectual, cultural potentials, and they're leaving, they're fleeing from Kosovo. It's a slow flow. It's not only brain drain, but it's also a slow but very continuous flow. And in particular, for the past 2 years, they're fleeing also from the north of Kosovo. What the Serbs have experienced in the way south of Iba River, now years ago, now has been transferred to the north. So describing Kosovo Serbs as such, I cannot expect that the citizens and the people will have real access either to the ASM, imagine tomorrow it will be formed, or Council of Europe, for instance, in the community itself. So while on the other hand, Council of Europe would certainly benefit citizens in the fight for their rights, when the institution fail, so I would say it's very positive. But on the other hand, tomorrow when Kosovo joins Council of Europe, I personally expect that it would be rather a great political victory rather than a real place where citizens can gain help or at least hope to gain help. For sure, I don't expect that Kosovo Serbs will be strong enough, as I described them, the condition they are in, that they can endure the fight. They can't, just one little example, they can't endure the fight to the institution, to the, let's say, constitutional court in Kosovo, to implement its own decision in Kosovo, let alone to hope that they can really endure that many year and expensive fight to fight for their rights within Council of Europe. Now, as for the ASM, I personally would have similar expectations had I not been in that way kind of pessimistic in the sense that the Serbian side personally would really insist on, when I say Serbian side, I mean official Belgrade, current Aleksandar Vucic as the chief negotiator, that he will really insist on making ASM as an effective protection mechanism for the Serbian community, the way it was planned partly with the Brussels agreement. For sure, I can't expect that from Kosovo authorities. So the bottom line is, I'm getting back to the beginning of my story. No agreement can be really substantially implemented unless there is unless the interested parts are stabilized. So when we are talking about the Serbian community in Kosovo, the Serbian people in Kosovo, they're a deeply destabilized community, and I personally don't believe that any agreement can really help them as such to stabilize them unless there is a huge change of public discourses, both in Kosovo and in Serbia. And on the lead are the leaders. Leaders are the one who should pave their way to dialogue, to reconciliation, but at the same time, the academic and expert community. And honestly, hearing some of the discussions today, I somehow still am not that high optimist, because I personally expect from academic community, from expert community, to be open for nuances, not to be on the verge of this populist narrative that is widely spread from politicians bottom down to their people. There are nuances. There are will to understand various stakeholders. Cannot be black and white story.
Okay, Tatiana, thank you. I hope, for my part, I hope that we've embraced and explained some nuances. I've certainly heard them here. I note Cendrim talked about populism in Kosovo and the responsibility of the Kosovo opposition and Luli also talked about the responsibility towards Kosovo Serb community. So I think that we have, all of our speakers have been responsible in that way. We're going to close soon. Tatiana, I want to come to you with the question at the point raised by Ognan, that again, these are inescapable things that are coming. There's going to be this 23rd of April election. People either will or will not vote. There either will or will not be incidents. But one thing is for sure is it very much looks like there will be an election declared and held on that day that will not be postponed. That's my understanding. So that's coming. That's 9 days from now. Ognan says that the right sequence is Kosovo Serbs to return and participate in the elections, and then through that do the assembly, through the municipalities, create the statute and approve it. And so how do you see that, Tatiana? And how do you see these elections transpiring there? What's your prediction? Will they be with high tension and incident, or will they just be ignored by many people? And what will that mean afterwards? Please.
I really avoid any time to be a fortune teller. I wouldn't dare to predict, but I would, speaking of elections, but I'm closer to an option that there won't be greater instability, at least in a long-term run. I think a lot of things have changed after 31st of July. I think that was kind of alert for at least KFOR and the United States. Maybe alert is not the right word, but I would say that the international stakeholders primarily as a real engine, the United States and KFOR, I mean NATO, they've been really on this security issue loop. And I'm pretty sure that they can serve as sufficient guarantor that greater instability will be avoided. I'm closer to that option, although on a wider public discourse, it doesn't look like that. And in particular, if you are really listening to what politicians talk about, both of Belgrade and Pristina, for instance, if you have listened to Mr. Vucic yesterday in Russia, or if you read this week's interview of Miss Vjosa Osmani to the British tabloid Sun, it's just two examples that when you are listening to this kind of one-sided, very populist addressing, many can start believing, okay, here we are again radicalizing the situation. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would say that with the KFOR NATO and with the United States behind the EU, but United States primarily, they are really very keen on avoiding any kind of major instability. Now, when it comes to the election, I wouldn't exclude, although I have no information whatsoever, but I wouldn't exclude a bit of radicalization of the situation in the eve of 23rd of April, probably in an attempt to avoid elections. Just shortly before this local Serb was shot on the Bistrica Bridge, I was almost sure that the election would be really delivered on 23rd of April, but locally situation has really changed. And in particular, how on one hand, we had this injuring of this Serbian civilian on the bridge, suspectedly shot by a Kosovo special police. But on the other hand, we had a complete mishandling of the crisis from Pristina, just reminding of the way how the police denied and then changed, etc. But that really changed the, I would say, the internal atmosphere locally. People are now really scared, especially when it comes to driving on this around Mitrovica Road. Both, I would say, Belgrade and Pristina currently on this latest crisis, more with Belgrade, pooling oil onto the fire. So perhaps there are chances to make crisis, this little, a few day crisis, look a bit more serious in order to avoid elections. Whether the elections, I know that the elections will be delivered, but I can't even exclude the little possibility that if this crisis continue, there are no conditions for these kind of elections. That's the problem.
Thank you, Tatiana. Appreciate that. And very well understood that as a famous baseball player in the US once said, predictions are very hard to make, especially about the future. So totally, your caveats there are totally understood, but your very nuanced depiction also very much appreciated. We're winding up now. I want to make it clear that anyone else here present in the room is welcome to have some brief remarks. And Albin, please, you wanted to say something.
Thank you, Ed. Just wanted to add that indeed, we know the recipe looking to Northern Macedonia, then Macedonia, or in 2001, we have seen that every time when US and the EU do coordinate the actions and are in the same line, we do see some success. I hope that in this case as well, US and EU as such, but as well the key capital cities within the EU will coordinate and push forward and not leave, let's say, not believe in the good faith of the parties in the Balkans, but use immediately the stick and the carrot, and to make sure that none of the parties will be able to somehow to block the whole positive process, which is a clear opportunity. And what Sonia Biserko was mentioning, this should be kept in mind, and it's nothing new indeed, that Vucic is looking for partnership with Tirana, and not, but you cannot neglect Pristina, and as well looking for territorial solutions, which indeed it was all the time the attempt to achieve solutions. And we know that territorial principles are not a solution for this part of the world. And I think it's true not only for the Balkans, but for Europe and for the world, if you wish. Thank you.
Albin, thank you very much. I couldn't agree with you more. And I have written that and said that. And so anyone, you know, just to go back, Sonia, I'm glad you raised that. This thesis is of, oh, you know, the big capitals and so forth. That approach, if that is the approach to, oh, well, we'll just defer to these bigger capitals, that's a great approach if you want to have US and EU permanently bogged down in tensions in the region. That's the Putin approach. So that is really effectively the Putin approach. You deal with, oh, we're the great power. You talk to us, and we talk about small states. It's absolutely, to me, preposterous. Anyone would take this thesis seriously. Look at a country like Moldova. This has been offered. I'm correct, Luli, EU candidacy. So you know, and this is the Balkans. We don't have, Russia's much more involved in there physically in Moldova than here, much closer, but the proximity. Balkans are much more distant. So there may be, though, policies like Open Balkans that have that result, that deference to Serbian power without dealing with values and common values in the region, European Union values, and NATO orientation. That, but to me, it would be a colossal mistake to go down that road, and I certainly don't believe U.S. officials consciously are going to do that. I think that they're working here and working here in Pristina and working in Belgrade to try to move it forward. That doesn't mean everything is the way I would do it. And certainly the posture towards President Vucic has much to be questioned. Luli, if there's anyone here who would want to take the comment, I would just say, I will close and try to summarize here. Again, I'd say with the exception of Ognen, one speaker, forgive me for calling you out, Ognen, but your viewpoints were very much appreciated and valuable. But I would still say that the wider consensus here today is that this was a meaningful agreement. This was not something to just dismiss, despite all of its, again, gaps and ambiguities, despite the abject negativity towards it, the hostile climate. That is, it's not something that's just some insignificant element and that we should just forget. So that's, I think that's what the other is, that people really want to see forward movement and want to see concrete improvement, reduction of tensions, and that there's a gesture for that. But this would be my key takeaway from listening to everyone here, is that there's such skepticism about the commitment to this agreement, and there's so much riding on it, but there have to be concrete gestures that really only the US and EU can provide. And that for local citizens here in Kosovo, all over Kosovo, and in Serbia, to really get activated and become believers in this, they need to see, this is my takeaway, this is my giving an op-ed, this is my takeaway, from what I hear, is that they need to see concrete investment by the US and EU. And we've heard some really good suggestions here. Have a UN General Assembly resolution, register it, have concrete steps towards implementation, form some of the elements that the EU is required to do in the agreement, like the Joint Monitoring Committee. Instead of these ad hoc meetings in Brussels, form the committee that the EU is supposed to chair and make these gestures, make the changes to the EU path for Serbia and for Kosovo that the EU is supposed to make as part of the agreement, that this is formally, these are obligations that are formally part of an EU path that show Kosovo that there is some type of EU path. So those are my takeaways, that a lot of this requires an external push to get citizens and leaders really behind it. Luli, do you have any closing remarks? No, then.
Just to thank.
Yes, I'm going to let Luli close out, and I just want to express my thanks to Dr. Ambassador Lulzin Petsi for his cooperation, collaboration on all this, to Open Society for Open Society Institute for sponsoring us today here at this great facility, and to everyone here who has participated. I'm going to read in order here on the original list: Sonia Biserko, Arbin Hajralahu, Dusan Janjic, Cendrim Gashi, and Tatiana Lazarevic. I want to thank you all, and I want to thank everyone here who's in person, the diplomats, officials, and academics and other experts who are here. And Luli, I give you the final word. And I also a shout out to Washington, to my SAIS events colleagues and SAIS IT colleagues and SAIS Foreign Policy Institute colleagues. You guys are the best. Thank you very much.